I survived an Antarctic expedition that almost killed us all. 5 years later, I'm finally ready to talk about it. I don't even know if I'm writing this for anyone else but myself. Maybe I just need to let it out after all these years. I've been sitting in front of this blank page for an hour now, wondering how to start. So here it is. 5 years ago, I was part of a small research team stationed at an isolated Antarctic outpost. We lost everything in a storm. And when I say everything, I mean everything but our lives, and even that was by a thread. There were 5 of us. I was the station doctor, a surgeon by training, Victor the engineer, Hannah the geologist, Julian the meteorologist, and Gregor our cook. Gregor was ex-military, quiet but solid, the kind of guy who could gut a seal with one hand and brew coffee with the other like it was nothing. We all had our reasons for being there. Some ran away from things, some were chasing something. I was the first kind. I'd lost my job at a major hospital after going toe-to-toe with administration over a patient's death. It broke me. You give everything you have to a system that doesn't flinch when it spits you out. So I disappeared, signed a contract, hopped a plane, landed on the ice, and tried not to think too much. Life on the station was manageable. You learn routines, wake up, check vitals, eat powdered eggs, run diagnostics, freeze your ass off during the daily perimeter walk. Repeat. The cold becomes a constant pressure, not pain exactly, just a weight. It seeps into your bones and never quite leaves. But we had heat, we had food, we had power. Until we didn't. It started with a weird sound in the middle of the night, a hollow, distant thunk like metal shifting wrong. Victor noticed the drop in pressure first. Something in the heating system was off. At first we thought it was minor, a stuck valve, a frozen line, maybe a glitch in the pump controller. It wasn't minor. The next day internal temps had started to fall. We tore the system apart looking for the fault. Nothing, no flow, no heat. Outside the wind was building. A Category 4 polar storm was on radar, the kind that eats buildings and buries entire convoys in ice. Evac was out of the question. No aircraft would fly in that, not with visibility under 2 meters and wind speeds hitting 140 kph. So we switched to the backups, diesel generators. Those noisy, stinking beasts roared to life, and for a while it felt like we'd beaten the odds. We moved into the core module, sealed off the outer corridors, and tried to conserve what little warmth we had left. But then fuel started becoming an issue. You don't really think about fuel in a place like that. It's just, there, tanks in the bay, cans in the storage. It feels infinite until it is. And in that moment the math hits different. 5 people, 1 generator, a limited supply, storm still raging, no help coming. And that's when the cracks started to show. We had protocols for this, charts, checklists, emergency rations. Hell, we even had drills where we pretended the heating failed. But drills don't teach you what it's like to hear your own breath crystallize when you talk. They don't show you what it feels like to wake up with your eyelashes frozen shut. The storm hit full force on day 3 of the failure. Whiteout, every window nothing but static. Even opening the airlocks for a few seconds brought in ice shrapnel that cut through insulation like paper. We sealed up completely. No more perimeter checks. No more outside work. Just 5 people, crammed into a module not much bigger than a couple of shipping containers, running on fumes and adrenaline. We rationed heat by time. 4 hours of generator time a day. Rest of the time, body heat, sleeping bags, double layers, and denial. Gregor built a makeshift stove out of an old sample container and a heat coil. It barely warmed a mug, but it gave us something to gather around, like a fake fireplace in hell. Victor was the first to crack. He didn't scream or throw things, he just got quiet, then quieter, until one night I caught him in the comms room trying to rewire the satellite uplink with bare fingers. He'd taken off his gloves. They were lying neatly on the desk like he planned it. His hands were already blue when I got to him. I pulled him back, wrapped them, injected a warm saline drip, screamed in his face to stay with me. He blinked slowly and said, "I can fix it. I just need the data stream." We had to restrain him after that. Hannah took it the worst. She and Victor had a thing, unspoken but obvious. After that night she barely spoke at all, just stared at the walls, drew maps in her notebook over and over again, even though she knew every damn inch of our station by heart. And the generator, it began to sputter. The fuel gauge lied to us for 2 days before Julian, our weather guy, ran the real numbers. "We have 26 hours of runtime left," he said. "Spread over 4 more days, maybe 5, then we freeze." Nobody answered. We just sat there, not because we didn't care, but because in that moment none of us knew what to do. It wasn't panic. Panic is active. This was deeper. Like the moment before a car crash when you realize you can't steer away in time. You just brace. But Gregor, of all people, broke the silence. "We can't wait for evac," he said. "We move." We all looked at him like he'd grown a second head. Move, into the storm, on foot, but then he unfolded an old printed map on the table. A weather relay station, 73 kilometers north, unmanned but with emergency supplies, and if we were lucky, a backup sat link. If we leave at dawn, he said, we'll have 30 hours of usable heat left, enough to survive the trek. Julian did the math. Hannah said nothing. Victor was still half conscious, swaddled in thermal blankets. I looked around at all of them, my team, my weird, broken family, and knew that staying was just a slower kind of death. I said, pack everything that burns, we leave at first light. Day 1 on foot was a slow, frozen hell. We each carried a 70-pound pack, food, thermal gear, emergency fuel cells, and anything flammable that could keep us from dying in our sleep. The cold was a predator, patient and cruel. It didn't bite, it seeped into bones, dulling reflexes, thoughts, even hope. Victor couldn't walk. His frostbitten hands were wrapped up like a mummy, and he shuffled like a drunk. We took turns pulling him on a sled we rigged from a broken lab cart and rope. Every bump felt like guilt, every mile like a verdict. Visibility was maybe 5 meters. The sky and ground blended into one grey-white smear. Julian led with a compass, but even he admitted we might be drifting off course. Still, we pushed forward, chasing an invisible dot on an invisible map. Night 1, we camped behind an ice ridge, wind screaming like 1,000 dying engines. Tents flapped, one collapsed. Gregor lost a glove just for a second, and 2 of his fingers went numb. He didn't complain, just muttered rookie mistake and shoved them into Hannah's armpits for warmth. We didn't sleep, we trembled in silence, pretending we were just cold, not afraid. Day 2, Hannah finally spoke. Back home, she said out of nowhere, I wanted to quit geology, get a farm in Vermont. Chickens, goats, a dog, never told anyone that. Julian laughed too loudly. You, in flannel, herding chickens. She looked at him with this strange mix of fondness and exhaustion. Yeah, I guess it's stupid. No, I said, it's human. The silence after that wasn't heavy, it was honest. Halfway through day 2, we hit a crevasse. It wasn't marked on the map. None of the satellite data had picked it up. Just a black mouth in the ice, 10 meters across, deep enough that when I dropped a flare, it didn't hit bottom. We had to go around 2 kilometers east, 3 north. It cost us 6 hours. And we lost a sled. Not Victor, thank God, but one of the gear sleds. A gust hit hard from the left ridge and flipped it right into the crevasse. Gone, along with half our emergency food rations. Julian lost it. He started yelling, throwing snow, cursing the map, the storm, the station, everything. I pulled him away before he got too close to the edge, but he wouldn't stop. We're gonna die out here, you all know it. This was suicide from the start. Gregor stepped in, calm like always. Then why are you still walking? Julian didn't answer, just sat in the snow, head in his hands. I sat next to him. Because there's still a chance, I said. Small one, but it's real. He didn't look at me, but he stood up 10 minutes later and kept walking. That was enough. That night the wind dropped to almost nothing, just eerie silence, like the continent itself was holding its breath. We built a fire from half a first aid crate and one of my old journals. I didn't even flinch tearing out the pages. I'd already memorized the regrets. And for the first time in days, we felt warm. By day 3, we were ghosts. The wind picked back up stronger than before, not constant, but in bursts, like something alive hunting. Our boots were falling apart. My knees felt like glass. Victor was delirious, whispering equations and machine schematics in Russian. We kept pulling him, I still don't know how. That morning, Hannah slipped. It happened so fast. 1 second she was walking, the next she was gone. The snow had covered a shallow crevasse, maybe 2 meters deep, but just enough to swallow a person whole. Her scream was short, a cut-off gasp, then silence. We dropped everything. Gregor went in first, roped at the waist. Julian and I anchored him. I held my breath the whole 5 minutes until he yelled, "She's alive, broken ankle, maybe worse, but she's conscious." Getting her out took another hour. I did what I could, stabilized the leg, wrapped her tight, loaded her on the remaining sled. I've seen worse trauma, but never in a place so cruel. No OR, no tools, just hope, cloth, and shaking hands. She didn't cry, not once, just kept saying, "Don't leave me," and we didn't. But that meant pulling 2 now, Victor and Hannah, and only 4 of us left. Julian cracked again. We were about 20 kilometers out, maybe more, maybe less. GPS was toast, our maps were old. I think something inside Julian snapped when we crested a ridge and saw nothing. No relay tower, no lights, just white, endless white. He sat down and refused to move. "I'm done," he said, "let the cold take me." Gregor argued, I pleaded. Nothing worked, so I did the only thing I could. I slapped him hard. Twice. He stared at me stunned. I leaned close and said, "If you give up, Hannah dies. Victor dies. You think that storm was hell. Try living with that." He didn't speak, just nodded, stood, kept walking. Sometimes rage is what saves us. That night we didn't stop. No camp, no fire, just marching through the dark, pulled by instinct, by ghosts, by the stupid, fragile human refusal to die. And then, at dawn, Julian saw it. A glint. Just a tiny metallic reflection on the horizon, 10 degrees to the west, could have been anything, but we changed course. Every step after that was agony. Frostbite was setting in on Gregor's fingers. My left foot was mostly numb. Hannah was shivering, unconscious most of the time. Victor was fadding fast, but we kept going because something was there. By mid-morning, the storm thinned. Not gone, just backing off like it had done what it came to do. And then we saw it. A metal structure half buried in snow, no lights, no beacon, but real, solid shelter. We made it. Barely. The relay station wasn't much, but it was enough. We found a small storage room with a working satellite phone, buried under a layer of snow and ice. There was no power, but the emergency generator was still functional. We spent an hour setting up and digging out the vents before the station's system finally kicked on, and we managed to get some heat. Not much, but enough to keep us from freezing solid. I called it in the rescue team, the evac, and I can't tell you the relief I felt when they answered, though the joy was short-lived. They told us they couldn't send a plane for another 24 hours. At best, it would be a week before they could safely fly in and get us. That meant more waiting, more isolation, more time to think about what we'd just survived. We weren't out of the woods yet. Gregor was fadding fast from the frostbite, and Victor was practically a corpse already. He'd lost consciousness halfway through the trek, and though we managed to drag him through the last few kilometers, the damage was irreversible. He'd never be the same again. Hannah wasn't much better off. Her ankle was broken, and the trauma had taken a toll on her body, but she was stubborn as hell, and in some ways that made her the strongest of us. I had to keep reminding myself that it was just an ankle, that she would heal, that she would walk again. I couldn't afford to let myself think she might not make it. But the real surprise, the one I didn't expect, was Julian. I thought he'd crumble under the pressure like the others. Instead, when we were finally holed up in that station, with the wind howling outside and everyone else half dead, Julian stepped up. He kept the fire going. He was the one who set up the emergency protocols and started pulling out supplies, getting everything we needed. I don't know where that strength came from, but it saved us. It brought us back from the brink. In the days that followed, we managed to stay alive by sheer force of will. The storm didn't let up, but we kept going. Every hour was an eternity, but we were still here. Every time I thought we might give up, I remembered something one of the veterans had told me back in medical school. You're not as weak as you think you are. No one is. That's when I realized we'd made it through because we had to. We were already dead in the snow, but somewhere deep inside, there was still a spark left. I guess it's true. When there's nothing left to lose, that's when you fight the hardest. The evac team arrived 3 days later. They were stunned to see us alive. The first thing they did was get us on the chopper and out of there. It wasn't until we were over the Southern Ocean that I finally allowed myself to exhale. The ride was silent. I think we all knew, deep down, that things weren't going to be the same after this. Even though we were alive, part of us had already died out there in the snow. The first few weeks after we were evacuated were a blur. The hospital, the physical therapy, the nightmares. We were all sent to different hospitals for recovery. The air felt too warm, the food too rich. I couldn't adjust at first. My body still screamed for cold, for the harshness of the wind, the biting frost. I hated how soft everything seemed, how everything felt like it could fall apart if you just let go for a second. Gregor's hands were a lost cause. His fingers were frozen beyond repair, and despite all the surgeries, he couldn't use prosthetics like they'd hoped. He lost a lot of his independence. But the real surprise came when he started finding new purpose. He got involved in the veteran community, working with those who had their own scars from war. He found his calling there, helping people adjust to life after trauma. I'll always admire him for that. He became a counselor, a guide for others who were lost. He still sends me letters. They're simple, usually just a line or two about the weather and how the new guys are adjusting. But it's clear he found peace in helping others, even if he couldn't heal himself fully. Victor's story didn't have the ending we had hoped for. The frostbite had done its damage, but it wasn't just physical. The cold had cracked something in him that couldn't be fixed. He couldn't go back to the field, not after everything. His mind never really recovered from the trauma. After some time, he returned to Russia, back to his family's cabin, somewhere far from the rest of us. I tried to reach out, but there was always a wall. His letters stopped coming, and I never knew if that was his decision, or just the inevitable result of his own personal retreat from the world. I can only hope he found a measure of peace, but it's hard to know for sure. Hannah, she was the hardest to read. Her ankle healed, but the emotional toll never truly faded. There were days when I thought she was fine, that she'd moved on, found her own strength like the rest of us. But I could see it in her eyes, a quiet sadness and exhaustion that never left. She left the geological field behind and started working in environmental policy. It seemed like the perfect fit, trying to change the world in a way that felt more tangible. But she moved far away, to a quieter place. We lost touch for a while after she left. I heard from a mutual friend a few years ago that she was doing well. She's found some semblance of stability, but I don't think she'll ever be the same. None of us will be. Julian was the real surprise. After all that, he went on to do something that felt almost natural. He became a climate scientist. He focused on extreme environments, researching what makes people survive and what makes them break. Sometimes I think he's still trying to figure out how we all made it through that storm. He kept a low profile for a while, staying out of the media, away from the limelight. But he came back into our lives now and then. Every so often, he'd check in, send a text, remind us that we were part of the reason he kept going. And I'm grateful for that. Julian found a new life. He chased something bigger than just surviving. I think he's happier now, more at peace with himself than I ever could have predicted. And as for me, I came back to the world, but it didn't feel like the same world. The first few months after I returned felt like a dream, but not the good kind. People go on with their lives as if nothing happened. They forget, but I didn't, I couldn't. I became a surgeon because in that OR I could fix things. I could make something broken whole again. I could give people back what they'd lost. And maybe deep down I was trying to fix myself too, trying to find some kind of redemption in the work I did. But the truth is you can't fix everything. Some things can't be repaired. And somewhere along the way I stopped trying to heal. I started accepting. I settled in a quieter town, smaller practice, less stress. The isolation was easier to bear. But even now, 5 years later, the cold still calls to me. It's not that I miss the storm. It's not that I miss the suffering. It's that the storm taught me something I can't explain to anyone else. It showed me how far people can go, how much we can endure when we're pushed to the edge, and I don't know how to walk away from that. But every time I think about going back, I remember the storm, the snow, the endless whiteness that seemed to swallow us whole. And I know deep down I can't go back. I don't have the strength anymore. Antarctica calls to me sometimes, in my dreams, in the quietest moments. But I don't answer, not anymore. Antarctica calls to me, but I will not return.